Good morning. So we're at towards the end of Siman Shin Mem Hey. We're up to Seif Tesvov, working through all the definitions of the various Rishuyos, Rish Rabbi, Rish Yochid, Mokom, Potur, Karmelis, etc. So we're up to now Tesvov. Bayis she'ein toiche asara. You've got a house which is not very tall. It's not 10 tefachim tall. V'keiruyoi mashdima la'asara, but the roof actually takes it to 10 tefachim. V'yesh by arba al arba, and it's 4x4 wide. So then the story is like this: Toiche karmelis. The inside of the house has got a din of a karmelis because it's 4x4, but it's less than 10 tefachim. V'al gabay rish yochid, but from the outside, the top of the roof is actually got a status of rish yochid because you've got an entity of 4x4 and 10 tefachim high. V'im choykek by arba al arba, but if you sort of hollow out from the inside a little ditch which is 4x4. Afilu be'emtza, even if it's in the middle, rochik min aksolim, which is distant from the walls, nase kula rish sayochid, that makes it into a rish sayochid because now you've got an area on the inside of at least 4x4, which is 10 tefachim from there upwards to the roof. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Nun says, v'yesh ba'abo al abo, haynu b'chalol, i.e. in the vacuum, the inside, you've got 4x4, de'i, ein b'chalol arbo al arbo, as if you didn't have that, su ein al toiche shem karmelis, then it's not even a karmelis. Toiche karmelis, the inside of this small house has got a din of a karmelis because it's more than 4x4, but it's less than 10 tefachim. Kivin de mifnim ein mechitzas gvas asara, because you haven't got mechitzas which are more than 10 tefachim. However, al gabay is rish sayochid. Why? Kivin shegvas sham asara, because you've got from the outside you've got walls of 10 tefachim. You've got an area of 10 tefachim by 4x4. That is a rish sayochid. V'im chokak. Bekarka habayis, says the Mishnah Berurah, you dig out sort of a little hole in the middle of the house, lahashlim she'egvei asara, that you now have a height of 10 tefachim. Then afilu be'emtza rochak, grotzoleim, afilu rochak yosem mishleisha tefachim. Even if this little chakak is more than 3 tefachim from the walls, deleka lemema do loved, you can't invoke loved. Afilu hachi sagi, that will suffice. Vahatam, and the reason is the Gabi Shabbos Ika Hakpeda Shei Harishus Shabasoich Mishtameres Al Yedei Mechitzas Hamakifim Oisa, because on Shabbos the Ika Kpeda is that the Rishus should be surrounded by walls which are protecting it. And since from the outside these walls are 10 tefachim high, or betoicha guma, and inside from the guma perspective, if you like, nami yesh gova asar tefachim adakura. This little chakak, this ditch, you've got 10 tefachim until the roof. Mikri haguma rish sayochid gemara. Therefore, this ditch, this guma has got a din of rish sayochid completely. Or shat stadi hachakak shesav haguma, and the bit around the chakak, which is not 10 tefachim, height of 10 tefachim. Mikri chayre rish sayochid. They're called the sort of the holes of rish sayochid, or the sides of rish sayochid. To rish sayochid, and they've got the status therefore of rish sayochid as well. Or chedrel b'seif dalet. Midvar of mashma deim lo hayu haksolim gevei asara mibachutz. The implication is that if the walls from the outside were not 10 tefachim, oz lehav rish sayochid elim kein hagumas smucha toich shleish tefachim lakoisel. That implies that the rish sayochid is only going to be rish sayochid if the walls, this guma, is within 3 tefachim of the wall. Domin and loved. V'hari kugov asara tefachim. Okay, say that's a particular point. So really what this Sifa said, that if you've got a small little house which is not 10 tefachim and it's 4x4 tefachim, so that is a karmelis. If, however, the height, including the roof, will be 10 tefachim, then from the top it will be a rish sayochid. The ma'anaf kamina, well, from the top you can't sort of take from there into rish sarabim or minatera. That you'd be chayiv to do that. But if it's a karmelis, then the issue would only be a drabon. Okay, Tez Zayin. Gag haboilet al mechitzas. You've got a roof which projects beyond the walls of the house. Be'inyan she'ein mechitzas habayis nikoros le'omed al hagag. And therefore, if you're standing on the roof of the house, you can't actually see the mechitzas of the house. Have a karmelis, that has the status therefore of a karmelis. V'afilu gevaya, even if it's very tall, v'roch of harbe, and very wide. Okay, so let's just do the Mishnah Berurah till there. Gag, kein gag shalonu, like our roofs, haboile, that project beyond the walls of the house, hatam, and the reason is the mashenasa hagag rish sayochid. When the gag makes something into Rosh Hashayachid, Hanu Mishum Damrin and Good Asik Mechitzas Hatachtonis Lamala. We elevate, we say Good Asik, the Mechitzas, we raise them theoretically until the roof. V'nimtza Abayis Mukuf Lamala Me'abed Sodin, and therefore the house is surrounded on all four sides. V'zeh lo shayach el hechesh ha-mechitzas nikaros la'omed al hagag, and that's only true if it's the mechitzas are clear and recognizable for somebody standing on the gag. But if the roof is covering over the mechitzas, lo shayach gud asik, you can't really say that. And therefore, if you're talking now, you can't say gud asik, and therefore you haven't got mechitzas. Therefore, it's not a Rosh Hashayachid, and therefore you can't carry on it. Ki im b'toich arba amas, kashar karmelis. With the karmelis, you can only carry up to 4 amas. Va'afilu hu goiva, even if it's very tall. V'hod de'isla kamon b'sif yutches de'in karmelis tofes rak ad asara. Even though we're going to say in Yutches that the karmelis only has the status of a karmelis until 10 tefachim. U'lemal mizeh have a Mokom Potur, but a field, for example, up to 10 tefachim has got a status of a karmelis, but higher than that is a Mokom Potur. Hainu davka heichesh karmelis maschelis Mokom anomach. That's only when a karmelis starts from a low place, or min akarka, from the ground level. That's when we say that it's got a height of 10 tefachim. Avulkan, the shem karmelis Allah machmas she'eno mechitzas, it only has the status of a karmelis because it hasn't got mechitzas, kashar shayochid, like other Rosh Hashayachid. Chal Allah shem karmelis, it's got the status of a karmelis. Af shegova yosim asor menaretz, even though the starting point is more than 10 tefachim from the ground. It's a roof, it's much higher. But on the roof itself, it clearly does not have the status of a karmelis, alavira, on the airspace above, rak ad asar tefachim, only up to 10 tefachim, kadin bika, like a field. Ve'ayin be'eli rabba, shemefagvek al psak ha-shulchan aruch, v'chein ha-gra b'bi'uroi, hevi kama rishonim u'pligid al din zeh. Al din zeh, he argues with this halacha, v'sovrit t'chol gavni ein shayach shem karmelis lamal me'asar, that you never have a karmelis more than 10 tefachim from the ground. V'chein le'inyan zizin ha-mavur l'kamen, so to beams which project, gamkein da'itam de'b'chol gavni ein aleim shem karmelis, ki mishu lamal me'asar v'hiskim l'dina imahem. And anything therefore more than 10 tefachim from the ground will never ever have the status of a karmelis. Mokom Potur, nothing, yeah. Okay. Now let's go back to the Machaba. The im chaloin. Now this roof, which projects beyond the walls of the house, there's like a little window, like a sort of a skylight, or what's it called? A skylight going through. V'im chaloin posuach lo min habayis, then have a Rosh Hashayachid. V'chein hazizna boltim lakoisel, and so too beams which project out of the walls. V'yesh bohem arba labo, and they have that measurement. Have a karmelis elim kein chalon habayis posuach lohem. Okay, let's have a look. Says the Mishnah Berurah, chalon posuach legag te'efshel lishtamish al gag derech shom. Now, in this situation, if there is a skylight where you can access the roof from the inside, from the house up to the roof, lochein nechoshev kol hagag k'chei Rosh Hashayachid. So then it's different. It will have the status of Rosh Hashayachid. V'chein zizin rotzolema af shehem gavoyim lamal me'asar. Even though the zizim go higher than 10 tefachim, given she'ein aleihem mechitzas svivam, since they don't have mechitzas around them, din karmelis aleihem, they've got a din of a karmelis, for also laniach mishus rabim v'chein Rosh Hashayachid aleihem. They will have the status not of a Mokom Potur, but of a karmelis, and therefore you can't move things from a Rosh Hashanah or Rosh Hashayachid onto them. Pasuach lehem de'oz nechshavim hazizim k'chei Rosh Hashayachid, and they'll have the status of Rosh Hashayachid. Okay, good. That's Tez Zayin. Yud Zayin. Chorei karmelis. Now, let's say you've got a field, and it's got a fence around it, and you've got holes in this fence. So chorei karmelis einom kekarmelis. They do not have the status of a karmelis. Elehem nedoinim lefi gavam v'rachbon. It all depends on their particular measurements. So the Mishnah Berurah explains, Hainu. Chorim sheklapi karmelis. We're talking about holes that face the karmelis. Imagine you've got a brick wall round a karmelis, round a field, and there are openings in this wall, but they're not flush, they're not all the way through. So they're just facing the karmelis. Can you imagine? Yeah, you've got like little crevices, holes facing the karmelis. Those holes have the status of a karmelis. Kagoin, says the Mishnah Berurah, Bayis hasomach lebika, v'yesh bekosla chorin hapsuchin lebika. You've got holes which are facing the bika. Umayri she'elim over me'eva le'eva. They're not all the way through. To ilav hochi have a chorish shayachid, uchadil el b'sif cotton tes. Ein Shom Mishnah Berurah. So, what's the halacha of these holes? So it depends on their measurement. Says the Mishnah Berurah Ayin Aleph. Hainu. If these holes, these crevices, have 4 by 4 tefachim, and they're between 3 and 10 tefachim tall, havri kakamelis. They have the status of a karmelis. Ve'imloi, but if they're smaller than that, have a mokum Potur. Even if they're very tall, they will still have the status of Mokom Potur. But that's all when the starting point of these holes are higher than 3 tefachim from the ground. Because anything which is less than 3 tefachim from the ground, then they will have the status of a karmelis, because they're bottled to the ground and it's considered like ground. Which is what we said regarding the Rosh Hashanah. Okay, good. Now, Yudches. Now we're going to define a bit more clearly the din of a karmelis. Geder karmelis. The rules of a karmelis are as follows. Shelo yehi pachos me arba al arba. They can't be less than 4 by 4 tefachim wide and long. Ve'ena tofeses ela ad asora. And it's only up to 10 tefachim. U'lemala me asora have a mokum Potur. But more than that, they would be considered a mokum Potur. Let's do the Mishnah Berurah till there. Geder karmelis. Rotzolema klal din karmelis. The rules of a karmelis. Shelo yehi ve'ena tofeses. Da'kilu ba mikule risharabim mikule rishayochid. Essentially, with the karmelis, you're giving it the kulas of both the risharabim and rishayochid as follows. Mikule risharabim, it has the kulas of risharabim. De'ena tofeses al adasar tefachim. Just like a risharabim only goes up to 10 tefachim. Well, so too a karmelis only goes to a height of 10 tefachim. Or chedel b'sifyud base. V'lo yavi rishayochid. And it doesn't go all the way to the rakia like a Rosh Hashanah does. Kedil b'sifhei. Umikule Rosh Hashanah, and the karmelis has the kulas of Rosh Hashanah. Delo yehi pachos me'abad tefachim al abad tefachim, that it can't be less than 4 by 4 tefachim. Uchedil b'sifbeis. De'im ha'amad machzik pachos mizeh have a mokum Potur, because were it to be smaller than that, then it's got a state of the mokum Potur. Uchedil kam b'sifyud tes. Ulamala me'asara rotzolema she'im ha'omad hayorachov arba al arba or pachas me'asara b'goiva. If it's less than 4 by 4, if it is 4 by 4, but it's less than 10 tefachim tall, she'yesh olav din karmelis v'kolat min avir she'olav lamala me'asara, and the avir goes higher up. Mutar lahitzi misharabim el sheyochid. Why? To have a kolat mokum Potur. You're taking something, if it's more than 10 tefachim, you're taking it not from a karmelis, from a mokum Potur. And from a mokum Potur, you're allowed to take it to either Rosh Hashanah or Rosh Yochid. V'chein, and so too, im noatz kona b'reish ha'omad, if you stuck a pillar into the ground or something, and therefore it reached a height more than 10 tefachim, havanami mokum Potur. It's got a status of mokum Potur. Mutzu likach misharabim or mishayochid lahoniach olav. Okay, good. Now let's go back to the Machaba. What about seas and rivers and things like that? V'yamim unecholim. When you have a sea or you have a brook, mimaya mashchinon, you measure from the surface of the water. Hilkoch. Therefore, hanoitel mehem me'al pnei hamayim. If you take from the surface of the water, ad asara ba'avir, have a karmelis. So the sea will have a status of a karmelis from the surface of the water, 10 tefachim high. L'malim asara, but above that, ba'avir have a mokum Potur. Okay, so when we measure a karmelis, the sea, for example, the 10 tefachim is from the surface of the sea. Says the Mishnah Berurah on that particular point, Ayin Hey, mimaya mashchinon, rotzolema she'ein moedin hasara tefachim. You don't measure 10 tefachim from the ground level, from the seabed, but from the surface of the sea, and that's called a karmelis, up to 10 tefachim. And you can't therefore carry 4 amos, because anything within 10 tefachim of the surface of the sea, you cannot carry more than 4 amos. Or you can't carry from there to Rosh Hashanah or to Rosh Hashanah. However, l'mala me'asara, rotzolema shem reitzel l'taltel ha'mayim she'nota me'al pnei ha'mayim u'lo licha arba amas ba'avir l'mala me'asara, then mutzah da'avik k'molich b'mokum Potur, and carrying from a mokum Potur would be allowed. Okay, good. Now, back to the Machaba, is actually the Ramah now. The last few words on the page. Bar ha'omeid b'karmelis. You've got a pit in a karmelis. Afilu omak mea amo, have a karmelis. Even if it's deep, 100 amos, it's got the status of a karmelis. Elim kain rochav arba alaba, unless it's 4x4 tvachim, the ein mokum patur bekarmelis, because you don't have a mokum patur in a karmelis. Commotion is by besomach, as we'll see in Mr. Hashem in Yutes in a second. Okay, let's see the Mishnah Berurah. Sif cotton ayin ches ha'omid bekarmelis. If you're standing in a karmelis, te'ilu ha'omid b'shurabim ha'yonechshav mokum patur, then that would be considered the mokum patur because she'ein ba'arba alaba if it hasn't got 4x4 tvachim or chadul kam b'sif Yutes. Afilu mokum amok mea amo, even if it's deep 100 amos, rotzolema. V'gam rochav pochas me'arba alaba, and it's less than 4x4 tvachim. V'atam mishum duhu bottle legabe karmelis, because it's considered bottle, negligible next to the karmelis shu omid bay. Uchadul kam ba'ba be'der rishona, like we're going to say in the Haggai in a minute in the der rishona. If you look at 54, if you've got it, I'll just read it to you. The first couple of lines. He says v'tam de'azu. Mishum shebemokum patur omid bekarmelis. When you've got a mokum patur which is in the karmelis, omrim motzam min esmino v'neir. We say that it's just negated to the karmelis. V'avrei mitzdarf lekarmelis shesvio, and is considered part of the karmelis. Of Ramah lahalon hevi dershnia, but the Ramah in the next sif brings a second opinion. Sheyesh mokum patur bekarmelis. It is possible to have a mokum patur in a karmelis. Ve'ena mokum patur mitzdarf in a karmelis, and it's not just mitzdarf to the karmelis. Okay, back to the Mishnah Berurah with the end of the fourth line. V'hod the kaimelon the geder karmelis. That which we said, the offense of a karmelis, shaloye pochas me'arba al'arba, or not the fence. The rule of the karmelis is that it can't be less than 4x4. Al karchach ayri ledas haga zu, according to this Ramah, heichad de ha'omid omed b'shurabim. When this pillar or something is standing in a shurabim, the ilu haya omed b'karmelis. If it was standing in a karmelis, afilu pochas me'arba al'arba, gam kein shem karmelis alel. It would have the status of a karmelis. The motzah minas mino bottle legabe, like we're going to say in a second. Elim kein hu rochav arba al'arba, unless it's properly got a 4x4, dov has a rishus hayachid, because then it would have the status of a rishus hayachid. Okay, let's just finish off the simon, because this is what the Ramah was just what Mishnah Berurah is just referring to. Okay, says the Mechabas if you test mokum patur. Who mokum she'ein arba alaba. What is so far we've discussed the definitions of a rishus hayachid, rishus harabim, a karmelis, and now the final one is a mokum patur. What is a mokum patur? Says the Mechaba, mokum patur hu mokum she'ein arba alaba. It has not got 4x4 tefachim length and breadth. V'gavaya mishleisha l'mala ad rakia, and it's more than 3 tefachim from the ground ad rakia. Eicharitz, or some sort of ditch, she'ein ba'arba alaba, that hasn't got 4x4, v'amag yosim mishleisha, and it's deeper than 3, v'chein ha'mechitzas ha'gvayas mishleisha l'mala, you've got mechitzas which are taller than 3 tefachim, v'ein beinehem arba alaba, and they do not enclose an area of 4x4. All of these things will be considered a mokum patur. Says the Ramah, v'chol ze dafka ba'omed b'rishus harabim. All of this is if you're standing in a rishus harabim. Avol b'karmelis. But if you've got a mokum patur in a karmelis, 2 opinions. Opinion number 1 is Amrina motzah minas minoi v'neya v'dinaka karmelis. We say it's just treated like a karmelis. V'yesh chalkim v'oimrim de'ein chiluk bein rishus harabim lekarmelis, and therefore it'll be treated like a mokum patur. But if you're in a rishus hayachid, then lekula alma dina kamosh rishus hayachid. Everyone agree that this mokum patur would actually have the status of a rishus hayachid. Okay, let's just finish off the Mishnah Berurah. She'ein ba'arba alaba. So a mokum patur has not got 4 by 4 tefachim. It says the Mishnah Berurah tefachim reichav. Afidu haya orach 1000 amma. Even if it's narrower than 4 tefachim, it goes very very far, 100 amma, 1000 ammas. The muruba arba tefachim al arba tefachim ba'inam. You need it to have at least 4 by 4 for it to be a karmelis. V'gvar mishleisha l'malo. But if it hasn't got 4 by 4 and it's taller than 3 tefachim, why taller than 3 tefachim? Because the normal rule applies. The pachas mishleisha bottle gabe karka, because anything less than 3 tefachim is just bottle. We just ignore it and it's bottled to the karka or chudel el basif yud, like we've said previously several times. V'amag yoyse mishleisha. Or if it's deeper than 3 tefachim, tos soifa v'tzorich leima v'amag shleisha v'yoyse. Or it's deeper than 3. That's how it should read. Or you've got mechitzas, and they do not enclose an area of 4 by 4 tefachim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, miloshen zeh mashma te'ein ovi ha'mechitzas mistaref l'arba, that the thickness of the mechitzas do not mistaref l'arba. V'ayin le'el b'sif katan gimel mashe kosavnu sham. Okay, v'chol zeh pirush kol ha'tziyurim ha'mevu'arim b'sif zeh boy arba l'arba have a Mokom Potur, that if it hasn't got through 4x4 tefachim, it's considered the Mokom Potur. Dafka ba'omed b'Rosh Hashanah. That is if you're standing in a Rosh Hashanah. Avol ba'omed b'karmelis. But if you're in a karmelis, alpha gav the lavi arba have a karmelis. Even though this little Mokom Potur hasn't got 4x4 tefachim, it has the status of a karmelis. The motza minas minay. It's like that's an expression, a borrowed expression we find in Issa Veheta. The motza minas minay and the two combine. Hainu ha-mokom Potur and motza es ha-karmelis shehi minay. They're similar natures. Shu gamkein mokom Potur min ha-Torah, because both of them have the similarity that they are potter from the Torah. They're not considered Rosh Yochid, not considered Rosh Rabbim. V'neo v'nischazek, and they sort of reinvigorate each other. And therefore will have the status of a karmelis. V'dinika karmelis of v'amad mechitzas anal. And they won't have a status of a karmelis unless they're 10 tefachim at all. But if a ditch, that can be much lower. Then we said Peizayin, this was the second opinion. The second opinion was that it does retain the status of a Mokom Potur. And then we said that's only true if it sits in a Rosh Hashanah or in a karmelis. But if the Mokom Potur is in a Rosh Yochid, it will have the status of a Rosh Yochid. Says the Mishnah Berurah Peizayin, shekol dover shehu toich Rosh Yochid, hu Rosh Yochid, has the status of Rosh Yochid, bein gevaya bein nomach, whether it's tall or short, bein rochav bein kotzer, whether it's wide or narrow. V'ayim b'achreinim shemesadin lahuris kedei rishona, v'ayim b'halocha. That's regarding the Mokom Potur, I think, in a karmelis. Okay, Beseda, we'll leave it there.